first wrote Rage, which is the red book there, with one with the red title, that's the story about my own time in the Sharpie environment. And then the blue one is the history of the Sharpies, and the yellow one is more of a social commentary. So the reason why I wrote it under my nickname was I was writing about people that I hadn't seen for many years, and I didn't know how it would be taken. So I wanted to separate my professional identity and the other one, just in case. But it was a precaution I didn't really need to take, because, as I'd hoped, Sharpies are quite vain creatures. We all wanted to be famous, we all wanted to be acknowledged, and pretty much everyone is really happy that they're in their book, or angry because I left them out. So it's quite funny. So why did I become a Sharpie? I always knew I was a bit different to everybody else, but I thought that was because my parents separated when I was 6. That was due to family violence and undiagnosed mental health, and Mum went into a psychiatric facility, and she didn't return to the family home, the part of the reason why was, at the same time, the Westgate Bridge fell down. So all of the courts were full up with all of that legal stuff. So all of the custody and divorce cases, all the family law, all got pushed to the side for 2 years. So they couldn't work out access conditions, so we just didn't see it for 2 years. So I always thought I was different because I didn't have a mother, and not many people in early 70 were being brought up by their dad. So, and then because I felt a bit different, and when I was saying before about being intimidated by ladies and that, like the girls at school with the lace socks and the rainbow lunch wrap and the beautiful bows in their hair, I couldn't connect with them, and they couldn't connect with me. So of course I sort of connected up with all the sort of more rebellious, strange kids. And we were strange in our own little way. Like in grade 6, we loved all the sort of scary cartoons, or the dark cartoons, Milton the Monster, the Groovy Ghoulies. We loved Deadly Ernest. We loved all of the Hammer horror movies. And in grade 6, we decided that we didn't like dolls. We went and got these little rubber monsters, and I googled them, and I think they were called oily rubber prisoners. And we used to make desks, monster houses in our desks. And so this will bring me to the first story. One day, my father bred budgies, so we were dragged around the countryside to bird shows, dog shows before that, and then when we got back in touch with Mum, it was cat shows. So, as you know, all those kind of people, they're very special. And, when you're at the shows and you're a child, you're allowed to run free. And, because everyone's busy. So I was always surrounded by interesting adults. So one day, one of Dad's budgie mates came over, and he had his son with him. And we were at the same school. Anyway, he got my little rubber monster, and he grabbed it, and he did that. You know how they get that look of glee when they're just about to pull the head off the toy? Yeah. Anyway, he did it, and I was just beside myself. I couldn't understand how someone could do something just so horrid. So I had to stick his head back on with pins, but then of course, then he was defective. It was a time when we were allowed to run around and roam free. We were free-range children, not battery hen children. So, especially during the holidays, we'd just be surrounded by all the other kids, older, younger, and things like that. So some of the things that I experienced was not in any order. Of being dacked, being topped. So, you've got the Miller shirt here. So basically you'd be wearing it, and then some dickhead boy would come along and go, and of course, you didn't have a bra when you were 11. So, we're having, now I understand that that's not you know, sexual assault. And I don't want to make this too heavy, but it is part of the story. Being pushed around for looking at another boy when I was 11. There was another boy that when I started high school, and I'd got in a blue with him. I'd called him a perv, and I'd learnt that word off number 96, and I just couldn't wait to use it. And so he's going into the nip bar, and I'm going out, and he sort of went, oh! And I said, you perv, and then that was it. We were at war. He was about 2 years older than me. But when I started high school, in my first week, he was walking behind me coming out of school, and he hawked up the biggest greenie on the back of my school dress. Sorry for being disgusting. And then, walking home from school, we lived next to the railway line, and you know, Dad was always saying, stay away from that railway line. And our hangout was the crossing between Croydon and Mooroolbark. And so, you know, beware of train signs. Well, it wasn't the trains we needed to be aware of, it was the kids. But then there was another boy. We kind of had a bit of a crush on each other at some stage. And I was sitting there with my female friends. We were just being silly little girls, about 12. And he went to Aquinas Catholic school. So he comes in his beautiful suit. So I start being a smart ass and I start singing horror movie right there in the garden, horror movie right there, and the girls take it up. So he goes inside, grabs an air rifle, comes out, aims it at us and starts shooting. One of the pellets hit the beware of train signs, ricocheted and hit me in the collarbone. So we all just screamed and just ran off. And it didn't pierce the skin, but there was, you know, a little, like, you know, bruise mark. And then the boys, if they were walking home from, walking along the train line behind us from school, they'd throw railway rocks at us. And if you've ever had that, that's, you know, and they'd shout out jelly ass or something stupid like that. And then the finale was, I had just a young boyfriend. Although they had been in Tirana Boys' Home, his brother first shooting a kid in the neck, and then they stole $1,000 and went on a day out at Luna Park and the Fun Shop and all those shops in the city. So, yeah, they were a bit dodgy as well. Anyway, so we were having a bit of an argument, and he's on the railway line, and I'm sitting under a tree near the crossing, and he's throwing rocks at me. And I didn't know how to break up with someone. And I thought to myself, if that rock hits my dog, that's it. He's dropped. Well, it didn't. It hit me on the head instead. And it clipped an artery, and blood just started spurting out. And I was probably about 6 houses away from home. I was wearing a black t-shirt with Julie written on it, just like this. And by the time I got home, that was all covered in blood. I went out and he's trying to chase me to, to stem the blood, and I'm going, get away from me, get away. Anyway, so then Dad has to go and find a doctor's that's open in the afternoon and get me stitched up. So I'd say I'd had enough of this. And as I got older, I used to look at Susie Quattrell, and there's a picture of her over there, and she's surrounded by the boys, and I just look at the album, and I think I internalised, if I was like Susie Quattrell, with all those boys behind me, I'd never have to worry again. So I grew up a little bit, and we used to go to the Croydon market every Sunday, and that was a great place to meet other people. And we used to go ice skating at Iceland and Ringwood 3 times a week. And on Sunday nights, we were so lucky, they would have a live band. And it was for, underage as well. So we got to see AC/DC, Rose Tattoo, Skyhawks, almost so close you could touch them. And then when we went there, we'd see all the Sharpies, because I was on the tail end. So over there would be the Melbourne Sharps, because they'd have their t-shirts on. And then there'd be, the Richmond Sharps up there, and then probably Blackie South up there, and then just lone Sharps everywhere. And they were the kids that were having the most fun. There'd be public displays of affection, the boys pushing each other, showing off on the ice, and all the other kids that weren't Sharps just watched them. Anyway, I was still trying to decide what I wanted to be, and I, got a golden breed surfy shirt for a while, and I still had long hair, and you know the shells around the neck. And then one day I said to my stepmother, "Oh, can JJ cut my hair into a Sharpie cut?" She goes, "Yeah, all right, here's the K-Tel comb." I don't know whether you remember them, but they were a comb that had a razor blade in them. So Julie cuts my hair, and it was, you know, she did a pretty good job. And then pretty much from that moment, my life changed. So when you've got a Sharpie haircut, you cannot hide who you are or who you want to be. Because if you're wearing your school uniform, you've still got a Sharpie haircut. If you're going to Sunday school and you're wearing your best Sunday clothes, you've still got a Sharpie haircut. So not long after that, some of the older girls saw that I was mixing my genres and wearing surfy clothes with a Sharpie haircut. So they were older, they gave me their hand-me-down cardigans. And so then I started going to Croydon Station and then meeting other kids that were hanging around, you know, the station rats that everyone hates. So, and then I met a Sharpie boy, and we became firm friends, and I actually saw him today, which is lovely. And then it went, we were walking around the market and we were holding hands, and when I got to school on Monday, it had gone round. Julie Mac was at the market with a Box Hill Sharp. Julie Mac was with a Bocky boy. And then all of a sudden I started getting respect. So not long after that, I started going out with one of the Croydon boys. They hung around the station. Some of them had cars, and they all looked like Bon Scott, pretty much. Yeah. So they'd wear a black T-shirt with Croydon on it, and their stand-apart thing was a football beanie. And then I met another Sharpie. He was involved in the East Side Sharps with affiliation to the Melbourne Sharpie, so that's how I got to know them. We broke up, and then I ended up going out with a friend of Jacques, the Box Hill boy, a friend of his name was Iggy, and he looked like a young Billy Idol, so he was pretty cute. And so we started going out with the West Side Sharps, and they were a lot of fun. We were all pretty much the same age. So unlike when we were with the Melbourne Sharps, where you had the older ones that would, you know, terrorise down the, you know, down the lateral violence, we all just were like brothers and sisters, and we had lots and lots of fun. And then, so now I'll also, it seems like we're romanticising it a little bit now, but it was violent, and you know, I would describe myself as feral, and you know, that was my upbringing. And also too, I'm sure you all remember this, seeing people strapped at school or being strapped yourself. And I can actually remember the feeling the first time I saw that happen, and I just realised that adults were just all hypocrites. So I didn't have any role models because I thought they were all stupid. Clothing was a really big part of being a Sharpie. So this is one of the cardigans. So around about the stripes have always been a part of subcultures. So the bodgies and the widgies from the 50s and 60s, they had stripes in some of their clothing. And then in the 60s, some of the boys did, but by the 70s, they'd, I'll take it off later, but they'd put the belt on the back. And so a cardigan like that would cost a young apprentice his full week's wages. So when you think of a young boy, about 15, 16, going to a European tailor in the inner suburbs and getting a cardigan custom made, fine wool, and wearing that. They had handmade shoes which were made by Venus or Acropolis, so usually they were Cuban-heeled, chisel-toed shoes, and they were, before that it was the winkle pickers, so remember the really pointed shoes. So they got to a point where they cut the front off because that was to differentiate between the two different decades. So the clothing was really specific, and it was all Australian made, locally made. Staggers jeans, I heard someone say Dash 8 before. Dash A, East Coast, all of those. Treads, Miller shirts, well, they were from overseas, but we liked them anyway. Most of us were employed unless we were in the juvenile justice. There was quite a few Sharpies that were in juvenile justice. So the boys were usually apprentices and the girls would either work in an office or a factory or a shop. None of us were really encouraged to pursue a career, and if we did, it was expected to be a secretary or a nurse, and that's sort of how it was. So I've always enjoyed writing, and when I was about 15, we all knew, because of our creative writing at school, that one day I would write a book. And then I went to one of the school reunions and one of the girls was just so bitterly disappointed that I wasn't an author and I was a secretary. And anyway, we all, the music shifted and we were growing up, so you had a choice. You could either become a disco head or a punk. So if the boys liked the girls with the long Olivia Newton-John hair or whatever, and the boys and the girls liked the John Travolta look, they'd go to grow their hair and go to the discos, which was usually just the local pub, the nightclub. And if you liked that harder person in the opposite sex, well, you became a punk and went to the punk clubs. And then not long after that, it just faded away. We grew up, we got married, we bought houses, and everyone concealed that they'd been a sharp, because we'd been hated for so long. Everybody hated us. Mums, dads, school teachers, cops, station masters, ticket inspectors, other Sharpies, other children, and we'd fight amongst ourselves. So when you grow up and thinking, and everybody hates you, you get to the point where you just don't give a fuck anymore. And it's the whole, labelling theory that, if you call me this, well, I'm going to do that. And so for all these years, we hid that we were Sharpies. And I will backtrack a moment. So the Sharpies, unlike the neo-Nazi skinheads, we were very diverse and inclusive. So, for example, the Thomastown Sharks, they were the most violent gang. They had Macedonian, South African, Yugoslavian, Cyprus, and I won't go on, but they had lots and lots of different things. There was Sharpies that were, in the old days, they called it deaf and dumb. I know we don't say that anymore. Sharpies that were in and out of the children's homes, the boys' homes and the girls' homes. And most of them were on the spectrum as well. And many, at the time we didn't know, but I think we all flocked, birds of a feather flocked together because of a trauma in the home. And then Facebook came along, and the first thing we did was start a Sharpies group. And to start off with, we only had about 30 members, and then it's grown to, well, there's two groups now, but there's more than 10,000. During this time, a man named Sam Biondo decided to hold a Sharpies exhibition in 2006, I think it was, and we went along, and it was based on these photos here, fabulous black and white photos of the Camberwell boys, who were a mixture of sharps and just hoods, or whatever you want to call them. And I said to Sam, I've got some Sharpie albums. I'll give them to you, because I thought, well, he's the curator. He may as well mind it. So a few years later, he said, I'm going to have another exhibition, and I'd like to, highlight some of your photos. Well, these guys, they absolutely cracked the shits, because, they weren't the originals. That was the 1960s Sharpies, but the early 70s, they were the next generation. So we were considered the dickheads. And then after us, there was another generation of Sharpies, and we referred to them as the shitmen. And then the next one that came along, which was based on a plumber who his dad used to make him, when he was apprentice, dig up all the trenches and the septic stuff, and he'd say, I'm the shitman. And then the last lot were kind of more feral sort of street kids. So I thought, and then a book came out called Glory This by Michelle Moo, and she was a literacy student, and the book was lovely. It was really beautifully written. However, whoever the Sharpies were that she spoke to, I think they took the piss out of her. So what she wrote, when real Sharpies read it, we just went, oh my God, this didn't happen. And my old, one of my old fiancés, who was my old fiancé, he was a St Albans Sharp, so that was from the complete other side of town. So I would catch the train after school on a Friday night and stay at his place all weekend. I think I was 16. My parents, they just gave up. And he rang me up one day and he said, I've just read this book. He said, you've got to write a book, Mac. You've got to write it. And so when Sam was having his exhibition, and by that time we'd found a lot of our friends and we'd had a couple of reunions, and so I thought, I might just start writing, and I'll write from the very first time I saw a Sharpie when I was about 11, and then through to when I stopped being a Sharpie and became a punk when I was 16. And I was only going to get 100 copies of it just for my friends. But Sam is a businessman, and he saw, he said, give me the manuscript. So I gave it to him, and he tried to get a publisher, but I was always going to do self-publishing anyway because I'm a control freak and I wanted complete control. So Sam pushed me, and he paid to get the front cover, so that's it over there. So that's me on the left, and on the right is my friend Andrea. And the day I met her, I was 13, she was 14, and she was on the run after having absconded from Winlayton Girls' Home. And as you can see, she's one tough cookie. And that was one of the most exciting days of my life. Just, we were running from, it was just, the end of the day, we're walking, we'd been swimming at the pool, and she was walking home because the girls used to run away from Winlayton back home because they'd be let out on weekend leave and they wouldn't want to go back to Winlayton. They wanted to go home, but the government said that they were in moral danger or at risk. And so we're walking across the oval, and Andrea and her friend look at each other, and this green fancy old car, a vintage car, comes straight across the oval and herds the girls up. And these two grown men jump out, grab the girls and throw them in the car. Lucky I'd heard the girls say, oh shit, it's Dennis, which was a stepfather. But at the end of my fantastic day with her, I witnessed the girls getting abducted. One of the things I read was, if you write a book, you automatically become the expert on the subject. And I thought, that's not going to happen. Anyway, it did. So, and I think part of the reason is because I'm female and because I've got the Irish gift of the gab. With the blokes, when they talk about the Sharpie scene, it's either the chicks they rooted or the fights they got into, whereas, or the music. So, it's a real different perspective as well. So I went through the internet and I also interviewed some people and recorded absolutely everything I could find on the Sharpies from the beginning of like 1952 until I think about late 80s. And at the time I was thinking to myself, this is a bit, I felt like I was cheating a bit because a lot of stuff I was just copying, cutting and pasting. But 10 years later, I've realised it was great because all that stuff's missing now. Websites have gone down, people have died, and I've managed to make a real snapshot. Then there was a reunion coming out with the Frankston Sharps, and I thought to myself, and I had a book that I've been sitting on, half finished for 10 years, and I thought, If I hammered that out and put a photo of the Frankston Sharps on the front cover and I go to the reunion, I'm guaranteed to sell 100 straight away. And so then all my old gang, and which was spread out, you know, east side Melbourne, west sides and all, yeah, they all got, what have you got them on there for? You know, why didn't you put us on there? And I said, it's a business decision. If you want your photo on there, give me $500. And I'm not normally like that. I had to shut them down. Yeah, because they were whining and they were actually ringing each other. I was saying, do you know what she's doing? Do you know what she's done? And then one of them would say to me, well, have you spoken to Bobby about that? And anyway, so I wrote that. And the difference between the three is when I wrote the first one, I'd been working in an office for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. When I finished SNAP, I just finished a diploma in community services. And then when I finished that one, I'd finished a bachelor in criminal justice because I did a midlife career change. When the book Puberty Blues came out, I remember being really angry. Like, these stupid surfy seaweed bitches, you know, everyone's reading about them. They're nothing, you know, so what? So what if they go to the beach and get pissed and throw up and have underage sex? So I wrote Rage in, I think, 2009. And every so often we'll get a student contacting us and saying, oh, you know, I'm doing a project on this, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a photographer, and I always help them, especially if they're female. And anyway, one young girl, she was about 19, she came to a talk that I was doing at the Royal Historical Society of Victoria, and she ended up getting funding to make a short movie, and she's based it on Rage, and it's currently doing the festival rounds, but as soon as it's not, I said to Janine, we might do a screening at the library or something. It's only 5 minutes. And another filmmaker who'd been trying to get funding since 1996 to make something on Sharpies, when she saw it, she said, oh, I don't know what I think about the dialogue. Well, no one knows. 14, 15-year-old kids, they don't have dialogue. They don't have conversation. And she said, and none of the characters are likeable. And I said, yeah, because no one liked us. No one liked me, you know. And I thought to myself, she gets it, but she doesn't get it. But this young girl, she's 24 now. The angle she did it from is she's from a Greek background. So the way she staged the film was the crossover between an elderly Greek manufacturer, an elderly Italian manufacturer and a teenage girl, a teenage Sharpie girl. And where in anywhere else would their lives intersect, except for getting a cardigan made? I started becoming interested in the Sharpies again. The only places we used to do talks and things were really just amongst ourselves. But then some of the people that study social history and things like that, they sort of worked out, oh, hang on, you know, they were unique to Melbourne, there was never anything like this again, and they sort of started to become someone to be studied. So since then, we've had a CD entitled Sharpies done through Warner Music, so that was a nice big debut, or whatever you call it. We've been to the Royal Historical Society of Victoria and a couple of others. So the book over there, Snap, I got asked to do a talk with Dr. Joseph Toscano on 3CR. So when we're in the studio, he's flicking through it and he says to me, do you know what you've got here? And I'm expecting a punchline. And he said, this is a catalogue of a working class social movement that ran parallel with the hippies and the uni protesters. And I went, wow.